there's this great book called Soul Retrieval, and I'm probably not going to do it justice, but the premise of and what I took from it was when this happened, when Dad and Reet were murdered, my soul, either all of it or part of it, escaped because it needed a safe space to be, while physically I was trying to walk and talk and breathe and eat, all of that. And so every so often I would get glimpses of my soul. And when I would get glimpses of that, those were the horrible crying times and the pain. It's as if when you have such a horrific tragedy that you cannot emotionally and physically experience it all at once.
Right.
So your soul gives you a break. And so then you can heal in small increments. It's a process, small increments. So
your spiritual part and your emotional part maybe depart a little bit, step back so you can run with your body, your physical part and your intellect, because that's what you need to run the daily life, to keep the wheels turning on the machine.
Right.
I'm Art Blanchford, and this is Life in Transition, a podcast about making the most of the changes we're given. As a married father of 3 teenagers, a longtime global business executive and adventurer, I've been through hundreds of transitions in my life. Many have been difficult, but all have led to a depth and richness I could never have imagined. You'll get to hear all about them on this podcast so that together, we can create more love and joy in our lives, no matter what transitions we are going through. Welcome back to Life in Transition podcast. I'm very excited today to have Mindy Corporon with us as this guest, and she is boy mom and all about helping others heal. And when you hear some of her story, you'll be amazed about what her focus is on that. So Mindy, I'm really delighted that you're here. Thank you for taking the time to join us on Life in Transition podcast.
Thank you, Art. I appreciate it. I'm happy that we were introduced and that we have this opportunity.
Yes, a shout out to Howard Brown. Some of you have heard his interview and he connected me with Mindy, which I really appreciate. I'm jumping right in, Mindy. What do you think has been the most meaningful, maybe most difficult, but most transformative transition that you have been through in your life?
Yeah, so I've given this more thought than I probably need to, because I'm certain people will look at my life story and if someone reads my bio and looks at my story and says, oh, her life transition was absolutely when her father and son were murdered and she was forced into a transition, a transformation. And that is what happened. In 2014, I lost my dad and son to a white supremacist. It was hate crime. So I definitely think it's worth speaking about and talking about how I moved in that space and then after that space. And a chosen transition was in 2018, was 4 years later. That was okay, I have to say that a yellow butterfly just appeared in front of my window while I'm talking to you.
Wow.
Like
And
just this so big yellow butterfly. And you see the yellow
wow.
butterfly on my necklace?
Oh, I was just going to say, that's
Yes.
meaningful to you. Obviously, I mean, I saw the butterfly image there before, but I didn't get it as a yellow one on your necklace. Wow.
Yes.
So
And then I have a yellow butterfly tattoo on
that's
my
what I
arm.
was just noticing for the first time and wondering if that was a yellow butterfly as well.
Yes. And so
Wow.
I
There's
didn't
a
mean to
lot of
digress, but it was
but a lot
so
of serendipity right there. A
it
lot
was
of
so powerful.
imagery.
So those
Wow.
things happen to me often, and I hope to be always open to them. In 2018, 4 years after my dad and oldest son were murdered, there was a choice for a transition, which I feel is definitely worthy of being part of the conversation, because it was another huge step in our healing process that I made and we made as a family by choice. But
And what was
just
that transition? I mean, it's obviously resonating with you right now. So what was that transition, that choice that you made in 2018?
I left my company, Mindy Corporon Wealth Management, that I had co-founded. I had chosen the year before to request from our team if I could work part-time in 2018, if I could work half-time in particular. I said, could I work half-time and get paid half? I mean, et cetera. And they had said yes to that. And then as we rounded into 2018, they really found other needs for me and for themselves. And my son, our son, Lucas, was moving to Florida. So we as a family had decided in November of 2017 that we would move him to Florida from Kansas, I should say. We were in Kansas at the time, in Overland Park, Kansas. So he would be moving to Florida to a golf school. It would be golf and private school for his
Mhm.
education. And that move was put in place because of his healing, because he was
Mhm.
not healing. He was not doing well in school.
Mhm.
And we were finding a path for him. And so I'll go back to January. In the month of January of 2018, I was no longer the CEO of Mindy Corporon. That happened more suddenly than I had expected. And we moved our son to Florida, and I was expecting that he would go to Florida and I would not, and my husband would
Right.
not. And within a week, my husband said he was also going to Florida. So therefore, I had a decision to make. And
Right.
so the
So you could
transition,
stay in Kansas by yourself
I
and
could,
visit back and
yes,
forth, or you could move with your husband to be with your son in Florida.
yes. And so I made the decision to move to Florida with them and keep our unit of 3 together. That's the transition that was really powerful and by choice. It came because of the murders in 14, but it was a transition by choice that I feel like has been very impactful in our lives.
And it fits with your introduction of helping others heal, right? Doing whatever's necessary to help the healing process. So
Yes,
what happened next? Like, what did you learn? What unfolded? So you quit the company that you had founded. You had planned to go part-time, but now you have gone completely
correct.
and relocated based on
Yes,
what's best for your son and helping him to heal and have the right education for him. And
yes.
then what did you learn? What did you see right after that? What things did you notice that you had to let go of? What that you were more connected to? And what did you see?
I found prior to that move that I felt like I was an outsider in our family of the 3 of us. When Reet,
Interesting.
our older son, Reet, was there, it was the 4 of us, and we
Mhm.
were connected. But at the time of his murder and losing my dad at the same time, so
Mhm.
at the time of the murders, I felt very alone. I lost my what I would say are my 2 people.
Mhm.
So my
Oh,
dad,
even in your nuclear family, even Reet
yes,
was your g I mean, I understand that, right? Reet
yes,
was your
Reet
one
was
and your
Reet
dad
was yeah.
so you were
So
super close with your dad and your son that both got murdered on the same day.
yes, I lost my people.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so
I'm really
from
sorry, that's really tough.
yeah, thank you. And it took a little while from 14 to 15, 16 to verbalize that to people and to verbalize it to myself, to really feel why, other than losing them and it's sad and it's horrible and it's drastic and all of those horrific things, but what is it that is making me feel so different now? And it was
Mhm.
because they were my people. I mean, simple things
Right.
like I was super close to my father. We had a great relationship and conversation and just so close. And I didn't know how close we were until I lost him, right?
Mhm.
I just didn't
Mhm.
realize how connected he and I were. And then Reet was my oldest son, so he was my firstborn. And again, we just read each other's thoughts and knew, and I knew him and he knew me. He and I had a rocky start. His biological dad and I got divorced. We started the divorce process when he was 4 weeks old. 4 weeks.
Oh, wow. Right.
So Reet and I were highly connected. So transition to 2018, where I made a conscious transition to leave Kansas. I had felt like an outsider with my husband and my living son. I had felt like an
Mm.
outsider in the 3
Mm.
of us
Wow.
because the 2 of them, they are
That's
very connected.
right, that's their people for each other,
That's their people. Yes, that's
right?
their people. And I knew that, and I could see that, and I appreciated it for them, and I was grateful for them and tried not to be sad for me. But when they were choosing to leave, and I wanted Lucas to find what he needed to find, and I felt as if Lucas and I needed some time apart. But then when Lynn said he was going too, and I had this choice, I really could have chosen to just break the family apart and say, well, I'm going to stay here. You all go do what you need to do, and I'll just parent from afar. And most likely, Lynn and I would have gotten divorced then. Maybe we
Right.
just would have been divorced. And
And how old was your son at this time?
he was 15. I
15
lost a
when
year.
this is coming, yeah, okay.
Yes. So he was leaving the home at 15 and going to Florida.
Right.
And I was happy for that. And he was happy for that. We, again, mom and son needed a break. We were really at
I
each other.
understand
And
that as well.
yes, and I was
I've
his
been there.
target. Yeah, I was his he was angry and I was his target. Luckily, I understood that. Luckily, I understood that that's what was happening with him. What I
So
didn't
you didn't take it
understand,
personally, and you didn't
right,
react to
well,
it, which is
I did
I mean,
initially.
yeah,
It
you're
took a
human like
while.
the rest of us parents, right?
Yeah, it took a while, but Lucas and I then got into a really good ability to communicate with one another. And I said, you know what, this is something that's going to be great for you. And I trust you. And you've always been independent. And this will be wonderful. And I think he felt very loved and cherished and empowered that we
Mhm.
were offering him this opportunity. But my husband also couldn't stay in our household without Lucas. So Lucas
Right.
was his person. And he,
Right.
we'd already lost Reet. And now
Mhm.
Lucas was leaving. And so my husband was following him. And so I
Mhm.
felt abandoned. And
Mhm.
so why did I make this choice? So I made this choice because I felt it was the best thing to do for them. I thought this
Mhm.
is the best thing for them and I'm going to try this and it's for Lucas because I don't want Lucas to be even more damaged than he is from the fact that he saw his grandfather deceased. He saw his brother, you know,
So he was there when the shooting took place.
he saw all the aftermath of everything that had happened. And there was another woman who was murdered, and he saw her body. He
Mm.
didn't see my dad's body or Reet's body, but he saw her body in the parking lot. And then he saw the aftermath and the chaos of what had happened. And he was in a household of grieving parents, of parents
Sure.
who were just completely distraught and couldn't really function. I shouldn't even say we could hardly function. We could not function.
Sure.
And so I didn't want him more damaged, and we were really working for him to find himself, and I would say I chose him, and because I was choosing him, I went ahead and moved. We went every month, but by August, we were living in Florida. So we moved him in January, and by August, we were all 3 now in Florida.
Okay. So this would have been probably his sophomore year?
Yes, it was the
Yeah.
second semester of his sophomore
So
year.
so starting that's what I wanted to point out, in the middle of his sophomore year,
Yes, he
he's on his
elected to
own,
go, yes, and he
but
elected.
it's a boarding school, so everybody else is on their own there, and it's a
Yes,
golf academy and boarding school in Florida,
yes,
and then
yes,
you guys
and
caught up to him by August.
by August, yes. So international students, a lot of the students were international. There were a few students from the United States, including Lucas, but the handful, I mean, there's probably his golf academy probably had 25 students in it. And I would say 4 to 5 of them were US citizens and the rest were
Okay.
international. So he loved that too.
Right.
He's always been super independent. And yeah, so we caught up to him in August. And the
And did he
day.
come home for the summer, or does that school go year round where he stayed in Florida even in June, July, May, June, July?
That's a good question. I'm trying to remember if he came home for the summer.
And it's not super important, but the
I
bottom
don't.
line is you guys were reunited as a family in
Yes, so on.
Florida in August.
Yes,
You had a
I
place to live and
he wasn't home very long. So no, he was not
okay.
home for the summer, like 8
Mhm.
weeks. I think he was home maybe 2 to 3 weeks and then he had to get back because we packed up the house without him.
Right.
We moved without him. There was a lot of transition without him. He got to say goodbye to his room and all of that. But yes, so he wasn't really there very much in the summer because we did the move. We were in the U-Haul on August 31st.
Okay.
And I just felt like my heart was ripped out of my body again.
From the relocation, you're leaving your friends, you're leaving your work, you're leaving your family.
Yes, I was leaving all the memories that should have happened. That's what we left. People asked about it, and I said, "You know what? I left every memory that was supposed to happen. I left every memory that did happen, and I left every memory that should have happened."
And that should have happened as 2 buckets. It had the 4 years of the memories that should have happened with your dad and your older son
Right.
that were stolen from you, and then all the future memories that should still happen
Yes.
as well in that community
Yes.
where you were from.
Yes, because we built the beautiful house. We had just put in a pool. The water was going into the pool the day they were murdered. So just imagine all those fun times we were planning to be in the
Right,
backyard and have friends over, etc.
right.
So I was literally leaving 13 years of memories because we were there 13 years, but 4 of those years had been without my dad and Reet. And then now all the memories that should have happened. And we were just starting over.
And also professionally at the same time, for you at least.
Yes, yes, and that had been a jolt. I had planned on going part-time, and now I'm not employed by anyone
Right.
other than myself, so I
So you're
employed
going into
myself.
a place where the only connection you have is your youngest son and your husband and his golf
Yes,
academy, and that's it.
yes, and that is it.
Wow, and how did they go?
We're still married, and we love each other,
6 years
and
later? Good.
more importantly, we love each other. We continue learning about one another, and our son is thriving. He is thriving, and for years, what I wanna speak about, what was important to me was for him to find his healing path
Mhm.
and to help him find his healing path. There's so much to say about this. So, right when the murders happened, and for a year to 2 years, he was suicidal. And so it was just survival mode. It was survival
Mhm.
mode for me and for my husband and for Lucas, just survival mode. because Lucas was suicidal 2 different times and needed specific care 2 different times. And
So you guys were trying to survive yourself,
yes,
support each other, you and your husband, and you
yes,
had to also be very vigilant and trying to, at the same time, take care of your son so you don't lose
yes,
another son.
yes, to keep him alive. And so he didn't really start healing until the 3rd year because I don't feel that you can heal when you're in survival mode. I feel like you have to get past that. It's like
Mm.
triage.
Mhm.
When someone is injured, there's
Yeah.
triage, and it's just to keep you together. And then you have the moments when you can breathe and have nutrition and
Yeah.
maybe have sunshine and all of those things.
So I wanted to ask you a question, if I can, Mindy, here. I wanted to go back to something you said quite a while ago, but it ties in nicely here. You said it took me a long time after the murders. 'Cause you're talking about you have to have space to heal. And you said it took me a long time after the murders before I could acknowledge that the two that I lost were my people. Why was that? Like, what was keeping you from that acknowledgement? And was your healing possible for you to start your journey until you could acknowledge that?
I think what kept me from that is my fear in saying out loud that my dad and older son were my people and that my
Mhm.
husband and my living son are not my people.
Right. That would make you
That
mean
would
or
that
exclusionary or favoritism or something like that.
Right, right. So I think I had an inclination about that, but I wasn't able to verbalize it until later. And then I was able to verbalize it. And when I could verbalize it and share it, I know it hurt them to hear that and to
Mhm.
think, well, who am I and why am I not one of your people? But they are. They are. It was just
Right.
that I lost the bread
The
on my sandwich.
Yeah, the
So
2 closest ones that you had.
yes, the
Yeah,
2
yeah.
closest at the time, and so why did it take time? I think because I was afraid to say it out loud
Right.
and harm them further. I didn't wanna harm anyone further, so there were many things that even my husband and I bring up now 10 years later that we now feel close enough to one another and with Lucas that we can say things now that we haven't even been able to say for 10 years.
Mhm.
And it's because out of fear of hurting them more by saying
Mhm.
something. That was part of it. I think that was key was I
And
didn't wanna hurt them anymore.
right, and that makes sense. And was that feeling, was that still triage mode? Or were you able to move into healing while you were still holding that feeling of not completely admit who you had lost?
I believe I went in and out of good healing off and on. So, I've read the book Soul Retrieval. Have you read the book Soul Retrieval?
I have not.
So, there's this great book called Soul Retrieval, and I'm probably not gonna do it justice. So, but the premise of and what I took from it was that when this happened, when dad and Reet were murdered, my soul, either all of it or part of it escaped because it needed a safe space to be, while physically I was trying to walk and talk and breathe and eat, all of that. And so every so often, I would get glimpses of my soul, and when I would get glimpses of that, those were the horrible crying times
Mm.
and the pain. It's as if when you have such a horrific tragedy that you cannot emotionally and physically experience it all at once.
Right.
So your soul gives you a break. And so that then you can heal in small increments. It's a
Yeah.
process, small increments. So
So
it's
your
not like,
spiritual part and your emotional part maybe depart a little bit. Step
mhm.
back so you can run with your body, your physical part, and your intellect, because that's what you need to run the daily life to keep the wheels turning on the machine.
Right. I would say I was in triage 3 years.
Wow.
To answer that question, I would
Right.
say we were all in triage 3 years. Lucas was in triage 4 years.
Mm.
And then when we moved, I had healed enough to be able to look at them and say, the right thing for me to do is go with them, even though
Right.
I don't want to. I dug in my
Right.
heels. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to sell the house. I didn't want to leave Kansas. I didn't feel like I was part of the three of them. I didn't
Mm.
know what it was going to look like. But I did because I felt like I didn't need them to hurt anymore. And I was learning to heal. And I felt
Mhm.
like I could help them. So I went with them.
So let me peel that back a little bit because I think it's really important. Like true joy, lasting joy comes from service. And at the same time, a lot of, if we overgive without taking care of ourselves, there's nothing to give from. And it creates a resentful, codependent type of situation. How did you know that you were, I'm going to put it this way, this may not be the right words. How did you know you were healed enough now to focus on them to say, I can go do this because this is what's right for them and I've taken care of myself enough? Did you consider that at the time? Was it just a feeling?
I considered it I'm nodding, and if people are listening, they're not seeing me nodding. So I'm nodding yes, that I considered myself healed to a point where that was the right thing, but I also had help. So
What kind of help?
One of your pre-questions is to be prepared as to what can we offer listeners, right? So what do
Mhm.
listeners need? What can be helpful? And I always think, gosh, I don't know what someone will find helpful. Everyone finds something different from when I speak. But that piece that you're asking me about right now is my support system said to me, you need to go with them. You're ready. You can go with them. They
Mm.
gave me permission to go. Not
And
everyone
that's
gave me permission to go, but
talk
my
very briefly
healers
about,
did.
okay, your healers. So 2 or 3
Mhm.
people that are in your support system. So a therapist, maybe it's a family member, but a
Yes,
family member that doesn't have another agenda, or a close friend that doesn't have another agenda.
right. I would say my close-knit family members, my brothers and my mom, I left, but I wouldn't say they gave me permission. They
Right,
did not really give me permission. I
right,
just said, "This is what we need to do, and I'm going
right,
to do it." The people who gave me permission and helped me see that I had enough healing that I could go with them were a specific healer. Cookie Harvey is a shaman healer, and we had befriended and employed
right.
Cookie within about a year. And Lucas had been seeing her, and I had been seeing her for care,
Or
for
okay.
spiritual, emotional care.
Yeah.
And she was
So she
critical.
knew the whole family very well, and she
Yes,
doesn't have an agenda, if at all, and maybe to get you to stay because you're customers of hers, but that's probably not
yes.
that strong.
No, I
Okay.
wasn't that big of a customer. I mean, we were there, but what I will tell you, which is just really, really sweet to say, is that I was so angry when I went to see her the day that she told me to go. I was so angry at Lynn, my husband.
Mhm.
We were moving and I was angry about moving and I was angry about getting the house ready, the whole thing. Lucas was in Florida and I just wanted the two of us to be okay where we were and let Lucas like find his space.
Right.
And so I'm really angry when I show up at her house. And the reason that that day got sparked into anger, I'm not one of those people. I don't get angry very often. Most people would say, Mindy got angry. She doesn't get angry. But I was seething and he had thrown away the flower petals from the funeral.
Cleaning up to move.
Ooh, I was hot.
Mm.
When I found out, when I came in the house and saw that the vases that had been there with the white and pink petals, they had been there for 4 years and they were gone.
So the flowers had just dried out in the vase and it was still sitting there 4 years later.
Yes, and they were supposed to still be there that day. I was hot. So I went to see Cookie. I think I had an appointment with her anyway, and I arrived and she could feel the energy immediately. She
Sure.
could feel it and she said, "Oh my gosh, let's get down to the room. Let's get to the room and let's see what's going on." And I couldn't quit talking. I was just, this happened and then he did this and then this and I don't want to do this and I don't want to go to Florida. And she'd been through the whole process of Lucas and going to Florida, etc. She said 2 really key things to me. She said, "1, dead flowers in a house, you will not heal. Take the dead flowers out of the house." She said, "That is not part of healing, keeping dead
That's
flowers."
holding on to the
She's
past.
yes. So I was angry at her about that.
Sure. Sure.
I'm like, "You're supposed to
Which
be on my side."
which is also understandable because you wanna hold on to the past. I mean, not
Yes.
logically, but of course, you lost your son and your father, which were your people. So
Yes.
it's another step in the healing to admit that that's past now, at least in this physical form.
Yes, and then after or during a treatment, during a Lomi massage treatment, she said, "Len is in a canoe and he knows where he's going, and you're supposed to be with him in that canoe."
Mhm.
And I wasn't happy about that either. But I listened to her. Just because we're not happy about something that we hear doesn't mean that it's not good for us to hear and to process and to be challenged by it and to give it consideration, especially when someone loves you and cares about you and doesn't have an agenda and can see something different than you can see.
Right.
So, one of the things I just want to say real quickly before I forget, one of the things that I think is important is to have people in your life who see things differently than you do and to honestly trust them
Mhm.
to hear their feedback and their thoughts. It doesn't mean we have to always take it, but it's important to have people who see things differently around us. And I call them my advisory board.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I think, and some of the best advice I've heard along those lines is, in general, don't give a shit what people think, but a handful care a lot, right? But
Right.
also make sure you understand their agendas as well. I care a lot what my wife says, absolutely. But I also know she has an agenda, right? And that's okay. But I have to recognize that as well in
Hmm.
making decisions. But in general, don't care what most people think, but a few people care a lot. But still, and I think it's really encouraging to me that you had your advisory board to tell you that you were in a shape that you could go. right?
Mhm.
That you had taken care of yourself enough and to help you move on. Another thing that you brought up that was interesting for me is you talked about that just because you don't like something doesn't mean that it's wrong. And I'm listening again right now to Michael Singer, who's there in Florida. I don't know if you ever heard of Michael Singer, but he's written The Surrender Experiment, The Untethered Soul, and Living Untethered.
I've heard of Living Untethered. I've heard of that. I was like, "How do I know that name?" I haven't read
He's
it,
in
but I've heard.
Jacksonville area, but I'm listening to that one the second time
Mhm.
right now. And he talks a lot about that our whole reason for being is not to have preferences, to not to like or dislike things, to just accept what is. And that's the surrender experiment, right? The planet's been 14.8 billion years, the universe getting to where we are, 13.8, sorry, about 14 billion years to get where we are. And most of it has nothing to do with us. It's not personal. And so it's not about liking something or disliking something. It's just about being clear. So the Rothschild's chart, the one that you see
Mhm.
the dots, you don't see anything in those dots because you're clear. You don't have
Mhm.
triggers. And then you can just do whatever life it is needs for you to do at that moment. So I'm
Mhm.
re-listening to that right now. And that came up for me when you were talking about that, yeah, this is something that you were healthy enough to do and you didn't want to do, but you realized it was the best thing to do. So how has that been? So you've been there now 6 years,
6 years. Yes.
coming up on 6 years in a couple months or in 1 month.
Yes.
It'll be 6 years. And
Yes.
how is life? What have you seen? What have you learned?
It's definitely had its downs and it's
Hmm.
had its ups, and it's gotten healthier. We have all 3 gotten healthier individually, each gotten healthier, and then as a couple, my husband and I have gotten healthier, and then as the 3 of us, we have gotten healthier.
How is it with your extended family? How are those relationships?
They're okay. So I have an immediate family, which is my mom and my 2 brothers. I have an older brother and a younger brother. I'm in a good relationship with all of them, and they are all still finding healing in their own way as well. My mom will be very vocal about, and she was on a podcast I did with her, and in the book I wrote Healing a Shattered Soul, and she has a chapter, and it's a very authentic chapter about her not healing, about
Mm,
her not finding
mm,
healing,
mm,
and how difficult it has been for her to not heal. And I know that she appreciates that we've healed, but she still can't find what we have found.
mm.
She is not finding that. And then my 2 brothers and I are close and communicate well. So I have an older brother and a younger brother. And then I have extended family, aunts and some uncles, but aunts and some cousins that I'm very close with, and on their own healing journey or my healing journey and ours collectively, because they were family members of theirs too, right?
Absolutely.
So they lost. So it's in terms of family, it's in biological family, that is where I sit today.
So, would you have done something different with that transition, the one that you chose, leaving the career, moving with your husband and surviving son to Florida? If you're looking back now, I mean, it's been 6 years,
6.
6
Mhm.
years. Looking back on it now, would you have done something different? What would you tell your younger self, your 6 year younger self right now, from the perspective you have now, Mindy?
I would say when you're negotiating your contract, get another year of healthcare.
Oh, from the severance, from the career standpoint. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, how shallow is
It is
that?
tricky.
But
It
it's
is no,
important.
but you know what? It's tricky. Healthcare
I
is
mean,
tricky in our society. I also had
um,
Cobra, right, when I left, and it only lasts a year, and then it costs $4,000 a month to continue
yes,
Cobra. And I thought, well,
yes,
I'm just going to buy some cheaper health insurance and have my own business and through the business. And so it's tax deductible. But when I look at what I actually spend, I'm not sure it wouldn't have been cheaper to stay on Cobra, but the good system. I'm
right,
spending over 5,000 a month right now on
right.
healthcare for my wife and 3 kids.
Yes. So that's the tactical piece of it. And what that means is realize that you're valuable, realize that you're worth asking for more.
Mm.
So when I divorced my first husband, when he and I got divorced, and I was divorcing him, and I had a client and a friend, he was a friend and a client, say to me, and he's still a friend, a very good friend.
And this was
He
a
said,
client in your wealth management business, Mindy?
yes, this was a
Okay.
client in wealth management, and he was a friend, and I was going through the divorce, and he said, I know right now you're in the middle of it, and you want so badly to be out of the middle. Like, you don't want any of this chaos going on. You don't want the frustration or the sadness or the anger. You just want it to be over and tied up and done. He said, you have to sit in the fire long enough to make sure that you really do get what you need in 30 years. He said,
Mhm,
think about
mhm.
10 years from now and 12 years from now instead of right where you are in the middle of the fire. So he had said that to me in
So that was
2000.
20, yeah, 20 something years ago. I was gonna say 25 years ago.
Yeah, so he said that to me in 2000. So actually, sorry, 1999. So Reet was born in 1999. So Jay would have said that to me in 1999. And then fast forward to Cookie Harvey, my healer,
Mm-hmm.
and I've just experienced my dad and son being murdered.
Mm,
And now I'm meeting with her. And she said it about Lucas too. And she said it about me and Lynn. We're in the fire. She's like, you all are in the fire right now. And that's why you're so hesitant to do much of anything because you are getting burned like every single day. It's like you're in the fire. And it takes a while for that fire to get put out and for you to understand that when the fire either is put out or you put it out or you move beyond the fire, you are different. You have melded. So when you put metal in a fire, you can then bend it and move it, and there's glass blowing with the fire, and you can bend it and move it. That's what happens to us as humans, is that when we're in the fire of something, even when we hate it, even when it feels horrible, it's molding us, it's shaping us. As we're moving out of the fire, we can really think about, now that I've been, softened, how do I want to be when I come out? And so that was very crucial as part of the developing process and healing process, was to say, I've been in the fire and now I'm different. So asking for insurance
yeah,
is
but
a
ask for what you need. Have the
yeah,
value to
ask
ask
for
for
what
what you
you
need.
need. It was
Things
kind of like a cheap way to say, you know what, ask for more in the contract. But I was in the fire and I wanted out so badly that I agreed to what they said
exactly, but
instead of
and I wanna dig into that for a
pausing.
minute because I think that's such a big lesson. This is called the Life in Transition podcast, and being in transition is being in the fire, and being in fire is uncomfortable. So we wanna get out of the fire. So if you took that lesson for yourself and maybe for your family, but for yourself, of when is the right time to get out of the fire? How do you choose? I mean, because it's a crazy, incredibly difficult. Most of us can have no appreciation for the situation that you've been through, losing your father and your son and being into that fire, but choosing to change a career, everybody can relate to, right? And that was still being putting yourself in the fire. And what I've seen is that a lot of people, they quit their job because it's miserable and then they're in the fire. It's incredibly uncomfortable. Who am I without my job? What's going on? How am I going to pay the bills? All this shame and doubt and fear comes up. So they jump out of the fire and go back and get another job, just as miserable as they were the day before, right? Because they weren't willing to stay in the fire long enough to get softened to form into something else. So, how do you know how long you need to stay in the fire? What's healthy and what's not healthy? Or do you step out and step back in? But how do you know?
Well, I will say there are moments when you step out and step back in when you can, because it's, if you have the ability, I mean, if you're in the fire 24/7, which is the enormity of grief. So
Yeah.
when a tragedy happens and it's the enormity of grief and it's the big ball of fire, you are in pain 24/7. So we were in pain 24/7 for about 3 years. So we
Mm,
were in the fire a
mm.
long, long time. Okay, so now I'm into the fourth year and I'm able to step out a little bit.
And that type of grief, losing a father and a son, that type of grief is like you're completely in the fire. There's nothing else going on, right? Like you change a career, you're in the fire from the career aspect of your life. But there may
Right.
be a lot of other areas where you still have safety, where you can continue to be molded from the career side. But when you're lost somebody or two people so close to you, then it's just burning. There's no safety edges.
Right. I like that you said there's safety. So in the ball of grief, in that fire that's happening, you do still need to find a safe place to be or have, etc. So you want to find some safety somewhere. And I found safety at church. I went specifically to the Wesley Chapel at Church of the Resurrection. So I found safety there.
Mm.
But now, so to answer your question about how do other people know if it's a career choice or if it's a divorce or something that,
Or how did
is,
you know for you?
how did I know when I was out of the fire?
Yeah, or when was the right time to come out of the fire? And you started with the career transition and the move because that's the one you chose. So maybe you start with that one. Like, when do you know that you're on the right next path? When do you know it's time to, if you use the Stephen Covey, we talked about Covey at the beginning a little bit, Stephen Covey language, to move back into production from production capacity. You're in the fire, you're being molded, you're being softened, you're going to come out a different shape. But when you come out, then you need to firm up again before you can produce a little bit, right?
I think we know it when we see it in the mirror, when someone reflects it back to us, that we look healthier than we did before. And here's what happened. We got to Florida in August of that year of 2018, and Lucas lived in an apartment. And so he stayed in the apartment so he would have continuity with his teammates and his school. But we saw him frequently for dinner or weekends, etc. But at the holiday at Christmas, he lived with us then in the home during Christmas, and I was cooking. That may seem normal, but when you are a CEO of a wealth management firm, you don't
Didn't
cook. I
didn't cook
didn't
very
cook.
often.
I
Right,
didn't
right.
cook. And so I hardly had days off. And when I did have days off, they were typically with him. We were going somewhere as a family. And so he didn't see me cook. And so now it's Christmas of 2018 and he's home and I'm making tomato soup and turkey and gluten-free breads and cookies. And he's like, "Who are you, Mom? This is interesting. I didn't even know that you could cook." And how I would answer your question is, how do you know when you're moving out of the fire is when someone that's in your sphere realize they see you differently than they've ever seen you before. He saw me differently than he had before because I was making my way out of the fire. That
So
was
he
it.
could see your new
Mhm.
form, if you take the glass blowing analogy, he could see your new form
Yes.
that was starting to solidify a little bit in that
Yes.
situation.
Yes, he could see my new form. And other physical things that I did on behalf of us is we had gratitude every single day. We had to write on Post-it notes 3 things we were grateful for. And some days he would write little things like the sun, water, and breathing, right? But then there were days when he would say, "I'm grateful for my chemistry teacher," or "I'm grateful," and he would put a little bit more thought into it. I mean, he was a teenager, so he was
Mhm,
still
mhm.
doing teenage he was still very much a teenager. And my husband and I would do it, and we would write what we were grateful for. And, because sometimes it's hard to come up with what you're grateful for, but when you see other people or you've had bad experiences, you realize there are many, many things that we could be grateful for in a given day. Well, fast
Absolutely.
forward
And you
when
shared
he,
these all 3 of you shared these together each day
yes, they
before.
had to be on the door before we left for the day. So they had to be
Okay.
on the door.
Of
He
the
couldn't
fridge
leave
or the house or
of the back door to the garage. He
okay,
had to put his Post-it notes on the door before he could leave for school.
okay.
Or leave for the day. And so we started doing that, and fast forward, he went to the University of Arkansas for college, and he graduated this May of '24. And when we went to visit him, he had 1 full year in an apartment, and we went to visit him, and the refrigerator had gratitude Post-it notes all over it, and his mirror in his bathroom had grateful messages and steps of what to do to be positive every day. And my heart just leapt. I'm like, he was paying attention. Oh my gosh. So it was just this
Wow.
beautiful full circle of him finding I put enough things kind of in his plate on in his way to say, what's going to help you heal? Pick up what helps you. Because just because it helps me doesn't mean it's going to help you. But that is something that he picked other things. He still plays golf. So he was in a golf academy and he's picked up golf again now after college and he's been playing golf every weekend. He's been in Dallas. So he's now employed in Dallas. And anyway, so those are I think I'm answering your questions. I
Yeah.
mean, those are things that have been very important and impactful to see. How do you know when you're getting out of the how do you know I think your question was how do you know when to get out of the fire?
Yeah, when you've been in it long enough to be softened up enough, and how do you know what's the right form? But you say when someone else reflects it back to you, and that's on a very, I think, a personal one, and on the grieving one. Would you have anything more to add if you were looking at it from a career perspective? Like we started talking about the choice to leave your company that you founded, that you were CEO of, and on a professional perspective, is there anything else, any other realizations you have, or things that could be useful to our listeners on that line of when to
On a
get out
pro-
of the transition?
Yeah, I would say on a professional situation and in a personal situation because I was divorced. And so I can speak to that. I can speak to divorce, I can speak to professional transition. And I would say when you are physically ill, when work or whatever it is you're in or whoever you're with is
Whatever
toxic,
is
what
creating illness, right?
right, whatever is creating the fire, right? Whatever is creating the fire, if that fire is making you ill, if it's making you ill, then you need to find a safe place to like
Mm,
pause from the fire. You need to find a
mhm.
safe place out. And then if you feel like you're melded enough and shaped enough, it's because you want to be somewhere else. You're ready to say, I can do it this way now and I won't be in the fire. Like it could be your same job, but you're going to approach it differently
Right,
because
right,
you've learned and grown and you've faced some challenges. Or it could be something completely different. And you say, oh, that idea that's been kind of niggling in my brain, it's becoming more and more of something that could be permanent. And it's actually making my heart flutter. I'm feeling a heart fluttering that I really like. I like that.
right,
And then that,
right,
to me, that's like the butterfly that lifts you out of the fire and
right.
it makes you joyful and happy. excited and
Right.
scared too. It's
Yeah.
okay to be joyful and excited and scared all at the same
Absolutely,
time.
absolutely. And I guess for my own I'm developing my own clarity about this, is we've had this metaphor of the fire, but I think for me, it feels like we're talking about 2 different fires. There's ones that cause real damage in a sense, and you have to have some safety and you have to be able to heal from, like a even if it's a work situation or a relationship that's physically making you sick or really, like that's being in a fire that's you just need to heal from as quickly as you can and get out of. I mean, I had a situation on another podcast I was on, I talked about it, and I think I talked about it in maybe episode 6 of mine, but my oldest son had reactive attachment disorder, and that was creating a fire in our house that was unsustainable. Like we were going to burn down the whole family.
Mhm.
So we moved him to a equine therapy ranch for a year and a half, which very difficult decision. He was 16 years old. But that was just taking that fire out of the house for now, so the rest of us could start to breathe non-smoky
Mhm.
air for a few minutes, and he could
Right.
as well, right? Then there's another kind of fire, which is this thing you talked about, is more about being uncomfortable and being in a learning phase. You've stopped something and you haven't started something else yet, and you're in this learning place, but it's very uncomfortable, but it's not unhealthy. It's not damaging you. I think about sports and injuries a lot. I'm pretty avid amateur athlete, and so I'm always a little bit injured, and I have to know the difference between something that hurts and something that's hurting me,
Right.
right? And so there's a lot of fires that are uncomfortable. They hurt, but they're not hurting me. And those are the ones that I still think a lot of people choose to jump out of. The other ones you need to get out of for safety as soon as you can, right? Because it's actually hurting you. But then there's other ones where it's this crucible that is making us into something else. It's what this podcast is all about, like this transition time where it's uncomfortable and a lot of people want to step away from it because it's uncomfortable, even though it's healthy, but it's hurting, but it's not hurting us, if you know the difference. And you've
Right.
answered some of that, like when someone holds up a mirror for you and sees you differently, then you know you're in a different place. And that's true. In that perspective, looking at the uncomfortable fire, but not the one that's actually hurting you. It's uncomfortable, but it's not actually doing you damage. Is there anything else specifically on the career standpoint, but it could be also on the family tragedy standpoint? Like, is there anything else you would say about knowing the timing to come out of that crucible? Not the fire that's hurting you, but the one that you've chosen. Like you said, you chose to move to Florida, you chose to quit your job, and you chose to go into this very uncomfortable situation of time of uncertainty. And is there any advice you would give on that one as far as when is the time to come out of that discomfort, or how do you know when you found the next right path for you?
So those are a couple of questions that you asked, and so they're different answers. So one thing I would say is I probably did too much of it alone. I could have included more of my support team along the way and more often. I sought a support team that had their own best interest. And
Mm,
so I sort of reached out for a support team that I thought, oh, this is new and different, and I'm going to try it. And I did for a year. And then I thought, this is not really who I am. And while it just wasn't who I needed to be at the time. And so I paused that financially and emotionally and physically, paused that process and reached back to the people who I trusted the most
this
and
advisory board you mentioned
and
before.
asked my advisory board for time. Can I have time? Can I have opportunity with you? Practice saying things that I wanted to manifest to being. Like, I'm thinking about this and I want to manifest this into being, and I want to practice talking about it. And the
Mm,
people that are on my advisory board would listen to that. And then they would ask me questions. And instead of feeling embarrassed or ashamed or super uncomfortable, I knew that they were asking me out of love and care.
okay.
And so I could practice saying things to them like, I'm considering finishing a book. I'm considering finishing the book. And I'm considering maybe it should flow in this way. What do you think about that? And they would offer their thoughts. And instead of me feeling challenged and going against them, I would listen to them. So, what's important about when you're in a fire that is challenging and perhaps by choice or because it was happening to you, but it's uncomfortable, but you know at some point you can get out of it, make sure that you've got people around you that aren't in the fire. And hopefully they aren't in their own fire at the time, too, because
Mm,
that can be very difficult when two fires are trying to have a conversation.
right.
So, find your advisory board and your support system and people who genuinely care about you and love you and want goodness for you, and they'll mirror back what they're seeing. And when they mirror that back, do I like it? Do I like what they're mirroring back to me? Do I like how they present who I am? And if I think to myself, no, I really don't like how they presented that back to me, well, why are they presenting that? Well, they're presenting that because that's what they're seeing from me.
Okay.
And if
Yeah.
I
So
don't like what I'm seeing, then I need to think, what do I need to change? What do I
is this
keep
the road
needing
I
to
want to be
change about
on?
me?
Yeah.
Is this the path
Okay.
I want to take? So for me, I've always relied on advisory board people, mentors, you can
Mhm,
call them
mhm.
mentors, friends who I come to find and have relationships with that I trust implicitly. And some of them are in different categories.
Sure.
They might be more professional or more personal, and sometimes I'll allow them to cross lines because I ask them certain questions. But that has been really healthy for me. I find that when I make mistakes and or stay in the fire too long, it's when I really forge alone and forge alone and forge alone and just go, "No, I can do it. Nope, I can figure it out." And I will even bring prayer in here. So
Sure.
to me, that's talking to God, and I will ask God. So most recently, I found myself needing to surrender. I've built this company, Workplace Healing. We're trying to find a home for workplace healing. It's a great human interaction for healing for corporations. And in October of 23, I went to the Grand Canyon for the first time in my life. And have you seen the Grand Canyon?
Yes. I'm
Have you
gonna go
been there?
run it. I'm gonna run it rim to rim to rim here in October.
I would love that. And so I sat there and I realized I needed to surrender. Things can't grow if you're strangling them. Things can't breathe if you're
Mm,
strangling them and holding
mm,
on too tightly. And so I needed to surrender and release. And I wrote that out in my journal over and over and over. I've written that out. And then I've let my advisory board know that's how I feel. And then I've let them mirror back to me what they heard. And I loved what they said back to me.
mm,
I felt like, yes, that's who I am. I want to be at
mm.
peace. I don't want to be strangling things. I want help along the way when I need help, and I want to offer help. I want to be able to offer more help. And I can't
Right.
offer more help if I'm strangling myself.
Right. Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, I think that's one theme that's been through this whole conversation, Mindy, is that to have people around you that you trust that you can get input from, right? That through whatever the transition is. And that's something that I definitely believe in and espouse as well. One final question for you. And we've really, because you can't talk about your life without talking about your personal loss, we've really had sort of two major transitions going on. So you could pick whichever one you want, but I'm curious, like, someone's going through a family tragedy of losing a very close loved one or a career transition that was an intentional choice, what's one tool that you would give them if they're right in the middle of it right now, if they're just lost somebody, or if they're just deciding to leave their career or their job? What's one tool that you would give them to take away right now that anybody could apply and they could take action on today? What's one thing you would offer?
Well, my best one thing is always journaling,
Mm,
always writing out your feelings and your thoughts in a private notebook. Your anger, your sadness, your shame, your disappointments, your joy. And I end it with, or somewhere in the middle of it, I pray for other people. I
mm,
think about other people that have health concerns or
mm,
other people that have financial concerns. And I specifically write their names and pray for them and consider how can I be of service to them.
mhm,
And so for me, writing out not just that piece, but writing out my feelings has helped me not hold my feelings in my heart. So when you strangle yourself by holding everything in,
you get the Dead Sea, right? Everything's
yes, you get the
holding
Dead
in.
Sea. Everything's holding in. Well, so it can make you sick. It can give you cancer. It can give you heart problems. It could just make you sick. So when you hold things in, it makes you sick. So write it out. Journaling can get you to the point that you could heal yourself, but I don't recommend it. I don't recommend you only doing it on your own. But I think that if there was just one tool, it is literally writing out all of your feelings because now you have you and you have your words. So
Mm,
that's almost like you've given yourself an advisor,
right.
which is in that page, because sometimes you'll write things and you'll think later, you'll go back and think, where did that come from? It may have come from some other kind of advisor that you just found
It's
in your
coming through
spirit.
you. Yeah.
Yes. So
So
that one tool would be journaling your
journaling.
feelings and your thoughts.
So journaling
It's
feelings and thoughts. Any specific times of day that you have found that work the best for this, or any other recommendations, or how often
well,
you should do it?
for me, it's in the morning, and I don't even do it every single day. I used to. I used to journal every single day. I probably journal 4 times a week. I
Okay.
probably journal 4 times a
Okay.
week, and 4 times, and I do it in the morning. I like to settle and center myself in the morning. I don't know about you. I wake up with my brain racing, 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 racing. I wake up and my brain's like, this is what's
Right.
on your calendar. This is what you have. Did you do this? Have you done that? And I have to tell myself you've got to settle first. Okay, it's almost like talking to myself. Okay, you've got all these things planned, but first we're going to read some scripture, and first
Yep.
we're going to. I read the Center for Action and Contemplation from by
Mhm.
Richard Rohr.
Yeah, yeah.
So I
I've been
read
there
that.
at his place in Albuquerque.
Okay, so I read that and I contemplate what that is, and then I write. I have a journal and I'll write, and then I'll pray for other people. And that is my centering and settling. And so I tend to do that in the morning. I would
Mhm.
think if you didn't do it in the morning, you would do it in the evening
Right
because
before you
maybe
went to
that would
bed.
help you, right? Maybe that would help you during your sleeping time. But I don't know how you would do that in the middle of the day unless you're in the middle of chaos and you need to remove yourself from chaos.
Right.
For me, it's morning. I'm
No,
an
but I
AM
think
person.
that's a great tool. I mean, journaling is fantastic, and having that piece of compassion for others, praying for others as well is another way of, as you said, separating. Journaling's a way of clarifying, separating, getting. I mean, I have God coming through my journals all the time. Right? I'll write questions and I'll write it directly. Okay, God, what should I do about this? And then I'll write the answer and then I'll read it.
Right.
Right? It's
Right.
very
I
powerful.
believe answers, yes, will come to you. And when I was at the Grand Canyon, it was clear surrender, surrender, surrender. So I started
Right.
writing in my journal every day God, give me the wisdom to see the doors that are closed and to understand that they're closed. And then and then open some doors and give me the wisdom to know which doors open and help
Right.
me be patient and surrender because
Mhm.
I'm not very patient. So help me be
Mhm.
patient. So I've been asking for patience and help surrendering.
Nice. Wonderful. Well, that's a great tool. And it's something that, as you said, anybody can do it anytime. Doesn't cost anything. You don't have to book any appointments except with yourself. And
Right.
just get up 15 minutes earlier or 30 minutes earlier if that's what you need to do it
Right.
first thing in the morning. No, that's wonderful. Thank you, Mindy. Last question. You've had so many interesting experiences. I mean, a very accomplished businesswoman. You've been through this horrible tragedy and now making healing companies out of that and written about that. Where can people find out more about you? Because I know there's a lot more to you than even the wonderful stuff we discussed today.
Well, professionally, I would have people look at LinkedIn. I have a website. It's myname.com. It's mindycorporon.com. I actually had a meeting with my website developer today, or website designer, and she said, "We're kind of ignoring your personal website." I said, "I know. I just feel like my personal website right this minute isn't as important as other things going on. My LinkedIn has a lot about me,
Okay.
and it's my name, and then I have a personal website. And then I have a foundation that I started, and we haven't, that was part of my healing process was 7 days. So I would love for any of your listeners to view 7 days. It's not necessarily about me at all. It's really about what we've created and the fact that we promote teaching kindness by overcoming hate. So it's 7days.org. It's sevendays.org.
.org. Okay.
And I would definitely be remiss in not promoting our foundation that promotes kindness.
No, wonderful. Yeah, we definitely need as much as that as we can have in the world today. And we'll put all of this stuff in our show notes. But thank you, Mindy, for letting us know. And thank you for being with me today and being so open for tough questions about, very, very tough situation and sharing your learning with other people, which I think can really help. So thank you very much for being with us today.
You're welcome. I appreciated being uncomfortable so I can goes over the fire a little bit, and I was learning and thinking about it at the same time, so I appreciate that. I was feeling like I've got more thoughts to think about it now as well, so I appreciate you and your time and your vulnerability. So it's important. I think that we've learned so much from podcasts and after COVID and how many of us, everyday people, can be great advisors for other everyday people.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mindy. I can't wait to hear what action you are taking. Connect with me on LinkedIn or our website, lifeintransition.online, and let me know. Let a friend know too. It could be a huge encouragement to them and keep you on the track. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and it would mean a lot to me if you left a review and shared this episode with a friend. If you want to learn more about me and what I do when I'm not podcasting, please visit me at artblanchford.com. Thank you for listening. Together, let's make the most of life in transition.